What's up everyone? In this video, we're going to discuss managing media queries and feature variants in Tailwind CSS. Before we get started though, make sure you're subscribed to my channel and getting notifications so you never miss when I release a video about Tailwind, Payload CMS, Next.js, and more. If you'd like to see the code that I use in this video, there's a link to the repo in the description. Now, let's dive in. By default, Tailwind CSS has variants for screen sizes as well as user preferences. This is what I'll be covering in this video. Some of these options simply add elements of delight to your website, but mostly they are a basic requirement to have a modern website. Supporting light and dark mode is almost a necessity at this point in web development, and having a website that doesn't respond to screen sizes is nearly a guaranteed way to lose your audience. Then there are things like accessibility features that can help users with different needs interact with your website. You have the ability to style based on a user's preference for reduced motion or increased contrast, which can make your website more enjoyable to use. In some cases, these accessibility features can keep you out of harm's way from people seeking to claim your website violates disability laws. Tailwind makes managing these features easy. Let's start with responsive breakpoints. We'll go into more detail about responsive design in a later video, but for now we can try out a few options to see it as an example. In our component.tsx file, we have an unordered list that we're treating as a to-do list. We can make these show up in a row rather than a single column by making the UL element display grid starting at the medium screen size by including the class name mdgrid. mdgrid calls for. Now when I save this, we can see since we're in the medium screen size that we get a row instead of a single column, but if I go down to the small size, we can see that it switches back to a column. If we want to decrease the number of columns at the small screen size, we can change mdgrid to smgrid, sm for small, and then add an additional class smgrid calls 2. And when I save this and adjust to the small screen size, you can see we now have 2 columns instead of just 1 at the small screen size. We go back up and we get all of the columns that we would get for the medium screen size here. Now, one thing to notice here is that as we go from small, we go to medium, and we can see that our grid is still applied here to the medium screen size, even though we didn't explicitly say medium grid. This is because we set it at the small screen size, which really sets it at all screen sizes from small and up. You will need to override display grid with another display value at a larger size to change this behavior. This means it's always a good idea to design from the smallest size first and increase in width after you get the smaller breakpoints settled. You can also use the @ symbol to style an element based on the width of a parent element rather than the viewport. This can come in handy if you have a component that can be resized on the client side that you still want responsive. We'll have more of that in a future video. You can use the dark variant to change how your site looks when a user's preferences are set to prefer dark mode. Anything you write without the dark variant will show up in both light and dark mode unless you override a specific utility class with its dark variant. For example, our list markers have a specific color set without any additional variants. If I add dark to the beginning of our marker color, we can see that in light mode, our markers stay their default color. So we will remove hover and just do dark for our marker text emerald 400. And nothing will change because they are going to be just black here. However, if we force dark mode by going to inspect element and then setting the appearance color scheme to dark, we can see that the color changes to the emerald 400 for our text color. While in dark mode, if I remove the dark variant, we won't see anything change because the styles are applied to both light and dark mode. So I just removed dark mode and I come back over here, and even if we refresh, it's going to stay that same color because there is nothing overriding the light mode variant for dark mode. Now we'll switch back to our system preference. If you have animated elements on your site, like a loading spinner, it may be a good idea to include a different style for those who have opted out of having excessive motion on their device. We can do this by setting the motion reduce variant. Let's start by creating a spinning icon by installing Lucid React. So we're going to run npm add lucid react. We'll use the loader circle from Lucid React, make sure that that imports correctly. And we're going to give this the class name of animate spin. And so now when I save this and restart our server, we will see an icon appear under our unordered list that just shows a spinning loader icon. If we want to make sure that this doesn't show up or doesn't move when reduce motion is preferred, we can simply add a new utility class, something like motion reduce hidden. So now I can save this and nothing will change until I go into my system settings, which is how Safari reads the user preference here. And I can then hit reduce motion, and we can see that the icon goes away. Well, if I still want it to be shown but not animated, we can just do motion reduce animate none. So when I save this, the icon will show back up, but it will not be rotating. If you need to ensure that classes are only applied if users allow motion, you can use the motion safe variant to make that happen. So if I do motion safe instead of motion reduced animate none, we can see that this will effectively do the same thing. And if I re-enable motion, we see it spin again. You can use the contrast more variant to change the styles of elements for users that have their settings enabled to increase contrast. For example, if we wanted our images to be in grayscale for users with prefers contrast enabled, we can do that by removing our group hover from our image and change it to contrast more and leave grayscale enabled there. And again, in our system settings, we'll need to change our increase contrast to true. And when that happens, not only does my entire UI change, but we can see that our images turn to grayscale. You can also use contrast less to change how users who request less contrast views your website. You can change how elements are styled based on the user's preferences for how colors are rendered. Safari relies on contrast settings for this, so we'll use Chrome to test this out. We'll change our image to be in grayscale when we enable the forced color preference by adding forced color grayscale instead of contrast more, and then save that. In Chrome, we'll open the developer tools and press Command-Shift-P and type in forced colors and set it to active. We can then see that our images are now in grayscale. And if we add not to the beginning of not forced colors grayscale, we can see that our image is now in color, and we can then disable our forced color by setting it to none, and we can see it switches back to grayscale because it is not in forced colors. I'll touch briefly on orientation and print. You can use either portrait or landscape to change styles based on the orientation of the viewport. If we change the variant for our image's grayscale to be landscape, we can adjust our viewport into different orientations to see the change. So if we go smaller, it is now in more of a portrait mode. But if I go wider, it is now in landscape. If you want elements to show up for print, you can do that by including the print variant. Let's try printing our page as it is. So when I hit Command-P to print, we can see everything is included. But if we change our fragment up here to a div with the class name of print hidden, and then we try again, we can see that only the element outside of this component is returned in our print preview. Tailwind makes it easy to make a highly responsive site that conforms to accessibility standards as well as fits typical user preferences, like styling for dark mode. If you found this video helpful, please like it and share it with others who might also find it useful. Check to make sure that you're subscribed to my channel and receiving notifications so you never miss when I release more content around Tailwind CSS, Payload CMS, Next.js, and more. If you have suggestions or questions, please leave those in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until then, I'll see you on the next one.